The land of Israel had fallen once again into darkness. After years of peace, the people turned from the Lord their deliverer and bowed before the idols of Canaan. They forgot the one who had parted the sea and fed them in the wilderness. So the Lord withdrew his hand of protection, and the Midianites came, like a swarm of locusts sweeping across the land. They stripped the fields bare, stole the livestock, and left nothing behind but ashes and fear. Israel's laughter faded into silence. The people hid in caves, threshing what little grain they could salvage before the next raid. For 7 long years, their rebellion led to ruin, until their cries finally rose again to heaven. Yet even in judgment, mercy was waiting. God was about to raise a deliverer, not from the ranks of the powerful or the brave, but from the heart of a man who saw himself as the least of all. In a small village called Ophrah, a man named Gideon worked in secret. He crouched inside a winepress, beating wheat, not in open air where it should be threshed, but hidden below ground, out of sight from Midianite eyes. The pit was damp, the air thick with dust. Every strike of the flail echoed with fear, but heaven saw him. While Gideon hid from his enemies, God was preparing his servant. The world saw weakness. God saw a warrior in the making. God's gaze has always reached deeper than appearances. He sees not what a person is, but what his power can make them become. It is often in the hidden places where fear feels strongest that God begins his greatest work. Gideon's heart wrestled with doubt. He had heard stories of God's wonders, but those belonged to generations past. Now, the Midianites ruled the valleys, and Israel was broken. Why would God choose him, the smallest of the small, to lead anyone? But God does not choose according to human strength. He chooses according to divine purpose. When the Lord revealed his messenger, Gideon sought proof of his calling. He prepared an offering and placed it upon a stone. Then fire erupted from the rock, consuming it completely, a holy blaze that burned away uncertainty. And in that instant, Gideon knew he had encountered a messenger from the living God. Fear overwhelmed him, but from that fear came peace. He built an altar and called it, "The Lord is Peace." For in every heart where doubt trembles, God kindles a fire of faith that steadies the soul. Before Gideon could deliver a nation, he had to confront idolatry at home. In his father's courtyard stood an altar to Baal, a monument to false worship. By night, Gideon tore it down and built in its place a new altar, one dedicated to the Lord. The next morning, outrage filled the village, but the deed was done. The false god was silenced. True deliverance always begins in the heart before it reaches the battlefield. God will not build his purposes upon the altars of divided devotion. Obedience, even when done trembling, is the birthplace of courage. The Midianite threat grew stronger. Gideon, filled with both resolve and uncertainty, gathered the tribes of Israel to fight. But his faith was still fragile. In quiet desperation, he laid a fleece of wool upon the ground and asked for a sign. First, that the fleece alone would be wet with dew, and then that the fleece would remain dry while the ground was soaked. Both times, God answered. It was not a test of arrogance, but a plea for reassurance. And God, rich in patience, met him there. He does not despise the weak who seek his guidance. He strengthens them with gentleness. Faith, for all its boldness, often begins as a whisper. At dawn, Gideon stood before an army of 32,000 men. The sight might have stirred pride in another, but God saw the danger of misplaced confidence. If they fought with such numbers, Israel would claim the victory as her own. So the ranks were thinned. Those afraid were sent home. 22,000 departed. 10,000 remained, but even that was too many. At the water's edge, God tested them once more. Those who knelt to drink without vigilance were dismissed. Those who stayed alert were chosen. When it was done, only 300 men stood beside Gideon. God had stripped away everything that could be mistaken for human strength. For when the odds are impossible, his glory is unmistakable. God often weakens us before he uses us, not to break us, but to teach us dependence. In our insufficiency, his power shines most bright. The vast Midianite camp stretched below Gideon like a sea of flickering lights. Tents filled the valley floor. Their numbers could not be counted. Fear pressed upon Gideon's chest, yet God, knowing his servant's heart, gave him comfort once more. At the edge of the enemy camp, Gideon overheard 2 soldiers speaking of a dream. One had seen a loaf of barley bread tumbling into their camp, striking a tent and toppling it. The other interpreted it as a sign that God had given the Midianites into the hand of Gideon. It was a simple dream, but it was enough. Faith flooded Gideon's heart. He bowed in worship right there among the shadows. Worship, not courage, turned the tide of his fear. For faith is the substance or object of your faith. It is choosing to trust when everything seems lost. The midnight air was still. 300 men surrounded the valley below, each holding a torch hidden within a clay jar and a trumpet at the ready. At Gideon's signal, the jars shattered. The sound thundered across the hills, light flared into the darkness, and the trumpets roared like a storm. Panic swept through the Midianite camp. In their confusion, they turned their swords upon one another and fled. God had fought the battle. Gideon's weakness had become the vessel through which divine strength was revealed. The fragile clay jars carried the fire, but they had to break for the light to shine. So it is with those who belong to God. Our cracks are not flaws to hide, but openings through which His glory pours out. Israel was free. The Midianite oppression was broken, and the land breathed again. The people praised Gideon and begged him to rule over them, to become their king. He refused, knowing the throne belonged to God alone. But even the faithful can falter. From the spoils of war, Gideon made a golden ephod as a symbol of victory. It was meant to honor God, but it became a snare. Soon the people turned their hearts toward the idol, forgetting the one who had saved them. The land had peace for 40 years, but peace without dependence slowly hardened into complacency. The test of success is often greater than the test of struggle. When victory comes, faith must remain anchored, for without continual dependence, even peace can lead to downfall. In time, Gideon returned to his home in Ophrah. The man who once hid in a winepress had lived to see his people delivered. He was not perfect, but he was transformed. When he died, Israel soon forgot the God who had raised him, but heaven never forgot the trembling man who chose to believe. Gideon's story is not the tale of a flawless hero, it is the testimony of a patient God, a God who found a fearful man in hiding and shaped him into a vessel of victory. A God who turned weakness into strength, hesitation into obedience, and fear into faith. He still works the same way today. He still calls the least to confound the strong, the uncertain to display his certainty, the broken to reveal his glory. Faith is not built on confidence in ourselves, it is built on confidence in Him. It is the steady hand that holds on to God when everything else gives way. And so Gideon's life whispers through time. Victory does not belong to the mighty, but to the dependent. For when faith clings to God, even in fear, the impossible becomes possible, and the glory belongs to Him alone.
Well done, good and faithful servant.